The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
On behalf of RBCS and software test professionals, welcome today to this webinar on whether testing is a waste of time. I am Rex Black, president of RBCS, a worldwide testing and quality assurance firm serving clients ranging from small startups to Fortune 20 global enterprises. Since 1994, we have delivered insight and confidence to hundreds of clients around the world. Our team of international consultants deliver customized training, consulting, and outsourcing services for companies that are looking to improve their test and quality assurance practices. I'm the author of 12 books on software testing, including the best-selling Managing the Testing Process and 4 books on the ISTQB program. We are presenting this webinar in partnership with Software Test Professionals. You can check out their website at www.softwaretestpro.com. And in fact, I am right now in Phoenix, taking a brief break from the excellent Software Test Professionals Conference, which is running today. Attending today's webinar may earn you credit for QAI and or ASQ recertification. You'll need to check with them to determine how to qualify. Typically, you'll need to save the attendee email that you will receive after this webinar. Attendance at today's webinar also earns PMI PDUs. Thank you to Murali Guthula for reviewing the materials for PDU status and making valuable suggestions. Attendees will receive an email telling them how to claim PDUs, including the PDU code. For the presentation, some housekeeping notes. Submit questions at any time via your webinar interface. But please note that I only look at them at the end. You do not need to ask for presentation copies, though I'm sure somebody will. The presentation is on the web at rbcs-us.com. Navigate to the resource tab in the upper middle, and then from there to the basic library, and you will find the presentation there in PDF format. Now, by attending this webinar, you have been automatically registered for the free e-learning drawing, so check your email over the next couple days and watch the spam filter. You could be the lucky winner. I hope you enjoy this free webinar from RBCS. We do these free webinars as a service to the software testing community because at RBCS, we are a not-just-for-profit company. So today's presentation is on testing and whether it is a waste of time. Obviously, to the hundreds of you online and listening right now, you don't consider it a waste of time, otherwise you would not be here. But maybe somebody that you work with does. Maybe somebody that you work with has been telling you, why do we waste our time on that, or testing takes too much time, and you might be having some challenges in terms of how do I communicate effectively about the value of testing. So let's look at some things that we can do there. So there is a famous quote from a famous bomb thrower who said a few years back at a testing conference, "Testing is dead." And no, I'm not referring to the infamous Kent Beck quote from the 1999 software quality conference in San Francisco, where he said the testers were dinosaurs. This would be James Whitaker's comment about 5 years ago, where he said testing is dead. Well, is it really? I mean, testing does tend to get shortchanged, as we all know. When schedules are tight, budgets are cut, staffing is reduced. Certainly, it's often the case that testers feel a disproportionate brunt of that. So maybe it's not so much that testing is dead, but just not seen as very important. Now, is this smart? Are organizations that shortchange testing making intelligent decisions? I would say no. Certainly there are clear benefits, and it's important that testing be done well to support quality deliverables. But one of the problems that we have as test professionals is we don't always make a convincing business case for testing. So let's look at how we can perhaps do that. Excuse me. So you see here on the right this famous quote from the Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which says, if you're a true geek, you already know this whole thing by heart. And this is the the not quite dead yet guy being brought out by his relative or something like that to be thrown onto the body collector's cart. Is protesting, well, I'm not quite dead. I'm actually getting better. So, certainly testing is something that is getting better all the time. There's a lot of people that do testing, and it's definitely a big investment that's made worldwide. So if you look at this figure from Forrester, they're estimating $50 billion annual spending on testing across the software industry. And if we assume that that's $100,000 per tester per year, that would be 500,000 testers. But given that there's a lot of outsourcing in testing, $100,000 is definitely too high. Certainly there's many more than 500,000 testers worldwide. So that's hardly the indication of a dead field. Plus, if you think about it, the ISTQB worldwide has issued 300,000 plus tester certifications, and it continues to accelerate. So it's highly unlikely that we've reached the point where most of the people involved in software testing are already certified. So certainly there's probably much closer to 1 million or more testers out there pursuing the field. But okay, so that's the plus side. But then if you go, all right, well, what's testing as a percentage? So if you look at Gartner's numbers here on annual IT spending, so they're estimating $4 trillion annual IT spending. So if we say, okay, well, we have $50 billion being spent on testing, but $4 trillion on IT as a whole, then that would mean that the overall testing budget, only $1 out of $80, or the overall IT budget, only $1 out of $80 is spent on testing, so slightly over 1%. Now, if we say that that's around 1.25% or so, and we've worked with a number of clients, and that what we see is quite frequently the case that at least 10 to 25% of IT budgets are lost on costs of external failure, avoidable costs of external failure. So what do I mean by cost of external failure? Well, basically I'm talking about bugs that could have been detected and removed earlier in the process that instead end up causing problems in production. Excuse me. So if we take the low end of that figure, the 10%, say 10% of $4 trillion, that's $400 billion. So $400 billion is being wasted on avoidable costs of failure in IT. Only $50 billion, which would be 1/8 of that amount, is being spent to avoid that waste, right? Remember, $50 billion is the Forrester number for how much money is spent on testing. Excuse me. So clearly there's a disconnect here, right? There's a failure to perceive the opportunity if we've got all of this money being wasted on external failure that could be avoided by spending more on testing. There's a $350 billion gap there. That $350 billion gap effectively represents our inability as testing professionals to effectively communicate to the stakeholders and the people that approve our budgets what we could be saving the organizations. So what are we doing? Well, we are basically not connecting with something that shareholders value, that stakeholders value, that they care about. Excuse me, I had to get a drink there. So, so if we're not connecting effectively with the people who should value testing, so the immediate question would be, who are these people that should value it? Basically, It's business stakeholders and technical stakeholders. So what makes somebody a stakeholder in testing is that they have some sort of interest or involvement in testing activities, such as a developer who is a technical stakeholder. They have some exposure to delivery of testing work products, such as a senior manager or executive manager who sees summary reports of test results. It's giving him hopefully insight into what the quality of the product is and how close you are to ready to ship. We have people who have an interest in system quality, such as the users, who would be clearly our business stakeholders, and they want to know, how good is the software before it's put into production or before it's sold. Now, you also have to keep in mind that a stakeholder can have a direct or indirect interest in testing. So, let's say that you are producing software for a bank. Every customer of that bank effectively has an indirect interest in the testing that's being done on the bank's software, because the quality of the services that they receive will be influenced by the amount of testing that you do. So if you think collectively across all your stakeholders, as I have just defined that cadre of people, do you think that they value testing or value it enough? So there are some reasons why they wouldn't value it. One would be, of course, you're not doing it right. You're not actually creating value. Now, you could be doing it right, but not actually delivering the value of doing it. So imagine if all you do is a lot of reactive testing, and you've got some people who they may be very good testers and very good at finding bugs. So they find a bunch of bugs, but then executives come to you and say, we would like a report on the status of the product, and you say, oh, well, we don't have any metrics, or we don't do metrics, or what have you. We just tell you how we feel about it. We think it's garbage. That's not likely to be very inspiring of confidence. The executives aren't going to go, oh yeah, wow, what a prophet, what a incredible source of truth. And they're likely to say, what a bozo. I needed this person to give me objective insight into the quality of the product, and instead I got opinions and bloviation. Now, it might be that you actually are delivering the value, so you are giving all the different stakeholders what they need from you, but they don't actually see the value of it. This is not an uncommon problem. We run into that with clients, not infrequently, not a lot, but occasionally someone will come along and they want, in our top-end training courses or some of our top-end consulting, and then their expectation is they're going to pay about a fifth of what we're going to charge them for it. And we're like, okay, well, apparently there's a problem with your perception of the value that's going to be delivered by this, because the market says that this is what it's worth. So, are you doing a good job of putting forward a business case that gives them in quantitative sense what their what the value is that they're receiving, or qualitative if that's the kind of value that they are receiving. So what I'd like to do at this point is go through some different ways that stakeholders might, perhaps should, value testing, and who those stakeholders are. And this should give you some ideas on how you can communicate effectively to your stakeholders about, in ways that shows them the value of what you're delivering. Let's start with the most obvious one, which is finding important bugs. Finding bugs that need to be fixed prior to release. Pretty much most testing activities, most testing groups would agree, yeah, this is a major objective for us. We need to find bugs. So if you are finding bugs, then how would you calculate the value of the bugs that you're finding? Fortunately, there is a well-established technique for this, which is called cost of quality. There's some information about cost of quality available on the RBCS website, as well as a tool, that a little simple spreadsheet that you can use to estimate cost of quality. So who's likely to be interested in this? Well, a lot of your stakeholders are likely to be interested in finding of bugs, and especially the important ones. Certainly developers, developer leads and managers, they are immediately on the pointy end of the spear, as the saying goes, with respect to bugs. They need information from you to help them identify the underlying defect and remove it. System architects, database architects also might be involved in defect removal of particular types of bugs. The designers, marketers, business analysts, senior management, product managers, project sponsors, project managers of various sorts. They're likely to need to have an understanding of what's the current state of the bugs. They might not want to have details, but they want to have a global overview. Tech support or customer support, help desk staff, those kind of people will want to know what kind of bugs you're finding, and certainly they'd want to know about any bugs that were not fixed prior to the end of the project. That's something that would be of great interest to them in many cases. And of course, users will potentially want to know about bugs. So, if there are bugs that are not fixed, they would want to know about that through some sort of release notes or errata sheets or something like that. There, it kind of depends on whether you're creating software for sale, such as consumer or enterprise software, versus IT software, how exactly you're going to communicate about this. So this is important, but be careful not to be, as the cliche goes, a one-trick pony. This is a very typical value of testing, but a lot of times people think about it as like, well, this is the only value of testing. And some of the times people won't say that, but the actions show that that's really all they're doing is finding bugs. They might say, well, we're providing information, but really, if you look closely at what they're doing, they're just finding a bunch of bugs. So, be careful that you don't fall into that trap. There's a whole kind of approach to testing out there that really is just kind of the big geeky bug hunt, and I think that's something you want to try to avoid. You also need to make sure that the way in which the bugs are communicated, the defect reports, is professional. Your organization might be very good at finding lots of bugs, but if the way that those bugs are communicated to others on the project, especially the developers, is very confrontational, insulting, then you can and should anticipate that far from perceiving value out of the bug reporting process, people will actually perceive it as sort of anti-value. It's damaging team cohesion and creating strife and all of the inefficiency that comes with that. And even though you might be delivering value in an objective sense with respect to cost of quality, the overall perception could be, God, what a bunch of jerks! We really don't need those people in our life, and so that keep an eye on that. There's a qualitative or customer, if you will, stakeholder satisfaction piece of this that you can't ignore. Excuse me. Okay, so I mentioned this or alluded to this earlier. Deferred bugs also have value. If you have bugs that are going to be deferred, one of the things that you probably want to do here is try to find some sort of workaround or some sort of mitigation option that reduces the impact of the failure on the end user and customer and other stakeholders. Now, it is possible to actually quantify the value of deferred bugs. I've done this before. We had one client where the tech support manager basically said, look, if we're dealing with a known issue that has an identified workaround, that's going to get dealt with much quicker than one that's brand new. And he said that he had estimated that every time he was dealing with a known issue versus an unknown issue, the savings was about $50. And then based on the average number of calls per defect, and the average number of or the number of defects, it's possible to say this is the amount of money saved based on these deferred bugs. So it's not typically a huge amount, but it's not insignificant, and certainly the value to the technical support or customer service people will be very high. They're the ones that are really going to see this as valuable to them. And, marketing and product managers are interested in this too, because they're going to say, okay, well, we can structure kind of an approach for mitigating the brand damage and so forth. So it tends to be important to them. But really all of the other major stakeholders will have some interest in this, some interest in seeing that, appropriate bugs are deferred, and that workarounds are identified. Of course, everybody owns quality, right? So everybody has an interest in this. Now, it's important to keep in mind that this is more of a secondary value than a primary value. Certainly, if you're finding a bunch of trivial bugs that get deferred, and at the same time you're missing a bunch of important bugs, then this is not going to be seen as a particularly good deal. What I would recommend that you do is calculate your defect detection effectiveness for all bugs, and then compare that to your defect detection effectiveness for critical bugs. And your defect detection effectiveness for critical bugs should be higher. So that's going to be a way of knowing that you're focusing on the right things. Now, another thing that we want to do typically with testing is reduce the risk of failures, reduce the quality risk, overall quality risk, to some acceptable level prior to release. You can't get it to zero, right? We know that it's not going to be possible to find all defects. There are going to be things that are going to get out, but there's always this concept of an acceptable level of risk, right? This is sort of inherent to any sort of project, especially any kind of engineering product. What constitutes an acceptable level of risk? So there are ways of quantifying this, and you can kind of try to look at insurance value. What's the insurance value of testing and so forth? But my experience has been over time that it's usually better to just talk about it in the qualitative sense of, we work collaboratively with the different business and technical stakeholders to identify risks and assess their level of risks via risk-based testing, and then we make sure that we have mitigated the risks appropriate to their overall level of risk. Certainly, people responsible for making release decisions, like marketing folks, product managers, project sponsors, project managers, senior management, and executives, they're going to be very interested in this. This is something that's going to be important to them, because they are going to, in many cases, live with the consequences of a ill-considered or inappropriately taken risk. And so we want to try to make sure that they get the information that they need, and that they feel that testing helps them achieve that acceptable level of risk out of the process. But of course, they're not the only people that are interested in that. Again, everybody has an interest in quality, so typically the other stakeholders also are interested in making sure that risk is reduced to an acceptable level. And, of course, people who are going to be on the receiving end, the tech support, customer support, help desk people, they definitely want to know, how much risk is there, because, the higher the risk, the more their phones are ringing, the more problems that they're going to have to deal with, right? Now, something that's important to keep in mind here is that any testing that you do is going to reduce risk. Anytime you do testing, you are reducing the residual level of risk to some point. Even if you only ran 10 tests and all of those tests failed, you would have reduced risk to some extent, because you would have changed those 10 areas from being unknowns to being knowns, which is less risky. But if you want to reduce risk in a way that maximizes the efficiency of the testing, in other words, you get the maximum amount of risk reduction for the effort expended, you need to do proper risk-based testing to do that. Pragmatic risk analysis and management, the technique that I talk about in my books, Managing the Testing Process, and Pragmatic Software Testing, some of my other books, is one way of doing that. I just gave a one-day presentation on that on Monday here at STPCon, and it was very well received. Somebody made the nice comment of, I learned a lot more than I expected to, which I chose to take as a compliment rather than just thinking, oh, well, he expected to be bored to death, and I actually imparted knowledge. But we are also going to be doing that as a virtual training session coming up in a little later this year, if you're interested in that through STPCon. So, make sure that you do enlighten yourself as to how to do proper risk-based testing. There are a lot of people out there in the testing business that talk about risk-based testing, and it means a lot of different things. But a lot of the time what it means is trusting the tester's individual judgment to figure out what to test, which doesn't work because the individual tester, in my experience, will only be aware of about 25% of the overall risk items at best. Or it relies on really excessively bureaucratic techniques that are very heavyweight and overly formalized for the situation, like failure mode and effect analysis, or it's just done at too high a level to provide any real significant guidance about what to test, which some other techniques do. They instead of identifying 100 or 200 risk items, are just very high, risk category level. Or it's dependent on the requirements and basically just processes the requirements and does a risk assessment on those. That's not what I would consider proper risk-based testing either. So if you're interested in risk-based testing, as I said, you can read my books. There are courses on this. We also have for free on the RBCS Digital Library a whole bunch of videos on risk-based testing that you can go out and listen to get enlightened. But you do need to make sure that you are doing risk-based testing right if you want to maximize the benefit that you're achieving here. Okay, so another very important benefit that testing should deliver is giving credible, timely, and accurate information to the various stakeholders, decision makers, managers, etc. That information can be about the status of the project. For example, have we run all of the planned test cases yet? It can be about the process, so what is our defect detection effectiveness? And it can also be about the product. So, for all of the requirements, risks, supported configurations, etc., that we have covered, what is their current status? Does it pass? All the tests are run and these all work. Does it fail? There are known problems with this requirement. Is it still unknown? There's still testing left to be done. So that's the kind of information that we need to deliver. We need to be able to help people answer questions that are going to come up in the process of making project control and product release decisions. And we need to give those answers at the appropriate level of detail, right? I mean, if I'm having a conversation with my daughters who are 10 and 13 at this point, and I want to have a conversation about I don't know, World War II or something like that, there are probably certain level of detail there that is just going to be difficult for them to comprehend, and they're not going to be interested in a 4-hour-long dissertation about the causes of the war and the Nazism versus fascism versus communism, versus the I guess you'd call Franco-Phalangist. You could just get into these levels of detail that would be well beyond what they would be able to process. But I could certainly say, well, it was an extremely large war that started between Japan and China initially, and then spread to Europe with the Nazis attacking Poland, and then the war was declared to the West, and you could boil this down into a short description. So when you're talking to a senior manager, executive manager, you want to give them the condensed version. Typically, they want, like, what do I need to know right now? When you're talking to a development manager, project manager, development lead, they're going to want more details. They're going to want to know more details on the status, and you're going to want to talk to them about the help you need from them to enable going forward, and they'll want to talk to you about the help that they need from you to enable them going forward and so forth. So it's a different conversation. So my key point here is that think about the audience. So don't make that classic test manager mistake of just doing what I call the fire hose of data, which is you just create some standard set of like 20 charts and graphs. They're an incredible level of detail, just really fine-grained, and all focused on the test case progress and the defect progress, which gives an incomplete picture if it's not balanced with coverage. And then like spraying that out on all the stakeholders and going, well, look, see, attached test status, let me know if you have questions. And then when you don't get questions, thinking, hey, great, everybody understands. No, the reality is that they just saw this huge bolus of information come rolling down their email and just said, oh, I give up. Keep in mind there's a very interesting four-letter acronym that sometimes gets floated around on email and text, TLDR, which stands for too long, didn't read. And this is what's going to happen when you do the fire hose of data on somebody. So, you can give people too much information, too frequently, too much detail. Think about what they actually need. Liberate yourself from the relatively poor built-in capabilities of most test management and defect management tools. Apologies to any HP people out there or IBM people out there, but most of the test management tools, they really focus on creating tactical reports that are of use primarily to the test manager to manage their testing operation and keep it under control. They're not very good at delivering targeted information to specific stakeholders based on those stakeholders' needs. And I guess I can't really blame them. It would be difficult for the tool vendors to anticipate all the information needs that could be out there and to construct charts and graphs to support that. Though I do think they could do a better job. Also, another thing that's very important to keep in mind here is psychology is an issue when you're delivering information to people. You have to contend with things like confirmation bias, which is that people find it easier to accept information that agrees with their currently held opinion. So if their currently held opinion is, we are going to deliver on time, and you're delivering information that says, no, we're not, then you're gonna run into some confirmation bias there. You also have a sort of similar type of situation that's called cognitive dissonance, which is where even if somebody is trying to be open-minded and accept information, if it's information they're not expecting and it's surprising to them, many times their brain will try to force it into a mold that it doesn't actually fit into, and they'll be kind of perplexed and maybe annoyed by this feeling of confusion and dissonance is it's what's called cognitive dissonance. It's a feeling of things not being all in line in your head, and so you might find that people exhibit a certain level of irritability when they're getting bad news. And in some cases, then you have to deal also with projection or transference, which is where people project onto you how they feel about the bad news that you just gave them. So, that is something that you do have to deal with. Now, what's the value of information? Well, it's very difficult to quantify. I generally don't try to quantify it. I think you can undermine your credibility if you're trying to quantify it. But certainly, For people who use information to support their decision making, it's essential that they get that right information from you. One simple thing that you can do to figure out how you're doing here, I've mentioned this on a few previous webinars, is just do a survey. Survey your stakeholders and give them two simple statements. One is the testing information that I receive from the test team is clear and understandable to me. And then the second statement is my understanding of the test status information that I receive helps me make better decisions on the project. And you would like all stakeholders to either agree or strongly agree with that. If they are neutral, they disagree, or for worse yet, they strongly disagree, then there's clearly something broken in your process. And notice you can have a situation where some stakeholders agree or even strongly agree and other stakeholders strongly disagree because you are attuned to and serving the information needs of one audience while at the same time not attuned to or not serving the information needs of another. So definitely critical that you do this right and you learn how to do it well. All right, something else to think about, reputation. Testing should help a organization improve and or maintain its reputation in terms of product or service quality. And, to take an obvious current example, whatever went on with respect to the testing and overall quality assurance for the healthcare.org website, for those of you who are watching that, has clearly done very little to enhance its reputation, and in fact, it's now, it's bleeding over to not just the reputation of the website itself, but of course, key people associated with the website and the underlying service that the website is supposed to provide, and all being called into question again. So, reputational damage is something, it's kind of like spilling a pot of ink. It doesn't tend to just sit in one place. It often does spread. Really, there's no way to quantify this, but I think everybody understands the importance of maintaining a good reputation, a good brand. It's like the thing about, they say about reputation, right? So it's a lifetime to build and a second to destroy. There's a famous anecdote of some baseball player or something who was acquitted of some sort of crime, and somebody asked him, I think the judge asked him if he had any questions. He said, yeah, where do I go to get my reputation back? So some cases this happens fairly or unfairly, but certainly, testing needs to play a strong supporting role in terms of helping to support a good reputation with respect to product or service quality. But you do have to be careful with this when you're telling people that this is one of the things that you are helping the organization do. Don't make grandiose claims like, oh, we're the guys that make sure that we deliver a quality product, or we're the sole champions or sole protectors of our organization's quality reputation, because that's going to set you up for quite the fall later. It also creates a dynamic, or can feed a dynamic, where other people are not attending to quality. So you get developers going, well, I don't really have to unit test because we get those testers there, so they'll catch all of it, which certainly happens. And you can also, if you position this value improperly, you can set up a situation where people are going to expect implicitly that your defect detection effectiveness is going to be 100%. So you certainly want to make sure that that is not going to be anybody's expectation, that they're going to expect that you're going to find some significant percentage of the bugs, but not all of them. And that's getting to some other process metric related issues that I've discussed in previous webinars, that you can check out the recorded webinars if you're interested in some of the discussions about metrics. Okay, testing will help enable smoother, more predictable types of releases going out, rather than big chaos at the end. Now, sometimes testing is the big chaos at the end. So, how do we avoid that? Well, one of the things that we want to do is use early testing like unit testing and reviews and so forth to make sure that the number of bugs that are delivered to the final stages of testing, like system test and system integration test, it's a manageable number. And then we want to make sure that we attack those in an intelligent way by doing risk-based testing and making sure that we're focused on the most important defects, and we find the ones that are most likely to be disruptive with respect to release earlier in the process rather than later. This is another value which is hard to put any sort of quantitative number on, but certainly it's one of those things where people will know it when they see it, right? So, folks inside the projects, as well as people who are on the receiving end of products, quality or lack thereof, and others that kind of have to live with the long-term consequences as well as the immediate consequences will value this if you talk to them about it. Now, release support, our role in helping predictable, smooth release support should be about maintaining high quality and delivering on time by making sure that we remove defects throughout the life cycle and focus on the most important ones towards the end. Just saying, oh, well, we enable release support by having no exit criteria and, being perfectly amenable to release regardless of the level of quality. That's not what I'm talking about here, and that's not what we should do. Now, of course, release is always a business decision. You need to provide people with the information that they need to make a smart release decision, and then the release decision ultimately is either made by product sponsors or project sponsors, or it's made by collectively by the project team. But it should never be, testers sometimes. I sometimes hear testers, and not as frequently now as I used to, but I do still hear it sometimes. Testers saying, "Oh, well, I want to be in a position to be able to stop a release. I should be able to hold up a release." I'm like, well, that's a real be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. That's going to put you in a situation where you are now the one who's making the decision about quality, and lots of luck to you in never making a mistaken decision about that. I prefer to think of testing as providing information to support smart release decisions, not testing as a quality cop trying to enforce smart release decisions. Now, another value of testing is confidence. And when I talk about confidence, it's important that we think of this as proper, confidence, true confidence, not false confidence, right? So you see this picture here of this cat who I think is about to be surprised rather mightily by the difference between a sparrow and whatever this fellow is, some sort of eagle, bald eagle or something. I can't vouch for the validity of this picture. It may very well be photoshopped, but it certainly is quite convincing and looking, and it does give the message of that cat clearly has a significant amount of false confidence in his ability or her ability to deal with that bird, which is going to probably have that cat for lunch, I would guess, if it proceeds any further. So what we want to do is deliver true confidence, properly based confidence in the product, assuming that the test results warrant it, right? Otherwise, it would be false confidence. Sometimes people get perplexed on this, and there was a whole Twitter storm over this. It's like, oh, the tester shouldn't build confidence. Well, of course, they shouldn't build false confidence. We shouldn't be telling people, oh, yeah, don't worry about it. Go ahead and put it in production. It'll be fine. And then it goes into production. It's like, whoa, look at that. Not good. Many bugs. right? I'm talking about true confidence here by providing information that supports the release of the system and says, yes, we have tested the important things, the important risks, requirements, configurations, etc. have all been covered. There might be a few issues, but the ones that we're aware of are not showstoppers. So we're trying to provide that kind of information. And again, it's informative. You want to be careful about creating a situation where you're again sliding back into that quality cop role or making strong recommendations for release and kind of carrying the day on that. But I think if you have information that says the product's good, then you have just as much obligation to be frank in your assessment in that direction as you would if you were saying that the quality was bad, right? I mean, it's not fair to interpret our role as providers of information to say, well, the only information we should be comfortable providing is information that says the product quality is poor and the product shouldn't be released. So certainly, many different stakeholders are interested in this, generally from different directions. So managers, senior managers, product managers, and so forth. It's sort of confidence that it'll be okay to release. For users, they're like they want to have confidence that this is not going to make their life into a disaster, having the software come out. Technical support, customer support, help desk people, somewhat similar. They're like, I want to have confidence that I'm not going to be stepping into one of the worst days of my professional career the day after the software goes into production. Excuse me. And confidence building is not just for the product. In fact, it has to start with building confidence in your testing. If people think that your team is not competent or is not doing an adequate job of testing or what have you, then how are your results going to help them build confidence, right? So imagine if the people who are a nightly newscaster showed up one night in full clown regalia, all the nose, the wig, the whole thing, and then sat down to proceed to give a news presentation, including props like whoopee cushions and bicycle horns and weird, high-pitched, inappropriate laughter at strange times. You would be thinking, oh, this is ridiculous. I mean, it wouldn't matter if what was coming out of that person's mouth was the revealed truth of God. At that point, you would have no confidence in the information that you were receiving. So, this is a situation where you have to earn your credibility, and then you can be effective as a confidence builder. So keep that in mind. If people are telling you, well, I actually don't have a lot of confidence based on your results, I mean, you want to dig into that, and that's obvious question to ask is that a matter of my team's credibility, perceptions of incompetence, etc. All right, so for some organizations, you also have some legal and regulatory value associated with testing. So here we see somebody, I think that's Ken Lay, the late Ken Lay, being led on an American legal tradition known as the perp walk, which is where police deliberately humiliate rich defendants in front of God and everyone as a way of sort of, I guess, sending a message or something. But if you're a senior executive, this might be one of the things that worries you, is that you would end up on a perp walk. There are regulations like Sarbanes-Oxley, and there are FDA regulations and so forth that could reduce could result in some kind of legal liability if testing wasn't done properly. So and the legal liability can be criminal, as in this case, or it can be civil. You're just going to get sued. But you don't even have to get sued. Like a failure to adhere to FDA regulations can result in a software-based medical device being excluded from the market. So really, there is a broad range of stakeholders that have an interest in these potentially. Now, it's very important that if you are going to need to deliver value with respect to compliance, legal and/or regulatory compliance, that you figure out how to match your testing up against that. It is if you have not done this before, and it's kind of a first time for you in complying with certain regulation, it would be very wise for you to find somebody who has done it before and consult with them first before you assume you can figure it out. Because if you forget something, that's not going to be a good excuse. You're not going to be able to stand before a judge and say, well, there was no intention to do this, I just forgot, or I didn't realize that the regulation meant that, because the response may very well be, well, you had a legal obligation to go about this in a competent way, and just by not investing the time to figure this out, you displayed disregard for the regulation, and so it's not going to be a convincing argument to just say, oh gee, whoops, I'm sorry. Also, you might discover in the process of looking at this that there are certain risks that you simply cannot address through testing. You want to make sure those get escalated and owned by somebody. Don't just look at it and go, oh, that's out of scope for testing. I guess somebody else will figure that out, because good teams help each other out, and that includes giving other people a heads up when you notice that something requires their attention. Now, of course, be sensitive in the way that you do that. You don't want to go and start getting to being bossy at somebody. Hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. They might say, well, I already know that I need to do that. Thanks a lot for telling me my job. So don't alienate a coworker here. But a gentle reminder that you noticed something, and oh, I'm sure you're already on top of this, but in case you've been too busy, I just wanted to mention it, or something like that. This is, of course, going to be most important with mission-critical and safety-critical applications. If you're testing a video game that runs on a smartphone like that, Ant Crusher app that runs on the iPhone or something, I don't think you have legal or regulatory value to your testing typically. Okay, so that's been looking at we've been looking at the value of testing, but what happens when there's insufficient testing? So it's good to emphasize, here's the value I deliver. It's also good to make sure that people are aware of the pain that will be associated with not having sufficient testing. So cost, make sure that people understand the differential between the cost of a defect you find and the cost of a defect that occurs in production. Customer satisfaction, again, damage to brand. Maybe you can point to some anecdotes about disastrous releases. The great one right now, and for as long as this lasts, is going to be this healthcare.org. Anybody who's considering shortchanging testing, if you're a tester or test manager on that project, you say, well, do you want to end up in a situation like that? Schedule delays when early testing is not done properly, of course. High cost of rework, something to mention when people are saying, oh, we don't have time for reviews. It's like, well, how much time do the developers have to fix bugs during system test? How much spare time do they have for that? What percentage of time should they spend doing rework rather than innovating? Emphasize the risk. Again, anecdotes can be good here. And also, morale. People, for the most part, want to be associated with things that have a good high quality reputation. People don't typically want to be associated with crap, So that's something that that you can also leverage. Is we all care. We collectively care very much about quality. So let's work together collectively to figure out how we enable the highest levels of quality. Now, it is also important that testing be seen as part of a larger quality management process. So certainly testing supports higher quality. where we do not find bugs, then we are building confidence, reducing risk. If even a test fails, it also helps because it helps us fix bugs, and overall the tests collectively should deliver information that supports an assessment of quality. So this is certainly, there's a clear relationship here, provided that we are focused on the most important quality characteristics. If if testing is off dundering around in unimportant areas of the product, then we're not doing much of a job of supporting a quality deliverable. But testing should be seen as part of a larger strategy for delivering quality and integrated into that. Also, testing should be seen as supporting long-term quality improvement, because by doing proper root cause analysis of defects that are found in testing and in production, then we can identify where the defects are coming from and actually try to reduce the number of defects going forward, which of course is great, because again, that's less rework, more benefits. Okay, so for those of you who remember Rodney, Rodney's famous line here was, I get no respect. And testing doesn't get a whole lot of respect either, at least not relative to the respect it deserves. I showed earlier, that there's effectively a $350 billion gap between the amount of respect that testing gets and the amount of respect that it really should get. So hopefully, by thinking about the value that you're delivering to stakeholders in at least one of these 8 different ways, you can come up with a pitch for each of your stakeholders that helps them understand what they are getting from you. So really, it comes down to three critical things from this value delivery. One is you've got to make sure that you do the testing properly, so you're creating the value. And then you've got to make sure that you are actually delivering the value to the appropriate stakeholders, because just doing the work well doesn't necessarily create the value. And then, last but not least, you do need to make sure that each stakeholder understands the value of what you're doing for them. Don't get to a point where your work is being taken for granted. Now, there are right ways and wrong ways to bang your drum. You got to figure out how to do that. So do understand the audience. Don't over promote yourself, but then at the same time, make sure that people do understand the value that is being delivered. And once you've done that, you're not done, because you need to also make sure that you're constantly improving, because certainly one of the things that will come up, can easily come up, is the "what have you done for me lately" question. How are you getting better? So when you're pitching to people and explaining, yes, we are delivering value to you, and here are the steps we're taking to deliver even more value, that's going to be an essential part of the message. Okay, so as usual, I will put up the advertisement while I go to the Q&A panel, and just undock here first and spread that out, get that up here. Somebody says that they had a problem printing out the slides. That's weird. I've never heard that. There shouldn't be any problem with printing out the slides. The PDFs are not print disabled as far as I know. Interesting. If other people have problems, send an email to info@rbcs-us.com. We'll take a look at that. Oh, and now Bill says he did fix that. Okay. Let's see. Got a question from Avner here, who says, when you say that finding bugs is not the only value proposition of testing, what are the other values that testing should stress? Hopefully I've asked that, or answered that question already by showing you the 7 other values. Let's see. Pete says, we are looking into using TFS, Microsoft Test Manager 2012, for our organization. What are your thoughts on using this tool to help track our test cases, chart graph, and its ability to performance test? So we have some clients that are using that, and you know, I've some anecdotal reports that it's passable as a test case management tool. You know, it's got a repository, you can track whether they've been run and so forth. Performance testing, I don't really know. I've never had anybody tell me one way or the other about that, so I've got no anecdotal information to pass on there. As far as charts and graphs, you know, I haven't looked at it very closely, but I would suspect that it's like the rest of us, like Quality Center and IBM's Rational Test Manager and so forth, that what you're going to get is a lot of very tactical stuff that talks about how many test cases have been run and how many are left to be run and how many pass and how many fail, and then things like you know, bug counts, various kinds of bug counts and so forth. That the other questions of, like, you know, which requirements and risks and configurations have been covered and what's the status of each of those sort of things, it probably won't be there. So I've done a few presentations on what I think are good testing metrics and dashboards and so forth. I'd recommend you take a look at those, Pete, and sort of benchmark what it's doing against what would really constitute adequate reporting. We worked with a client last year to help them develop a special spreadsheet that kind of sat on top of Quality Center and did automated data pulls out of Quality Center to update the charts, and that really was a huge improvement over what was built in there, and it was a complete 180 in terms of the relationship that test manager had with the project manager before and after instituting that. It's called the Core 4. So, you know, do take care to do this right. Pete asks, please repeat your 2 survey questions so I can type them down. So the 2 survey questions, you're referring to the ones that you would want to ask or put in front of the managers. They're actually statements. So one of them is the information that I receive from testing is clear and understandable. And then the other one is my understanding of the information that I receive from testing enables me to do my job better. And you know, variations of those are fine, but basically that's, you know, do they know what you're talking about, and does it help them do their job better? And be ready when you do this, because a lot of times when we do this as part of an assessment, the answers that you get are, you know, that people disagree or strongly disagree, especially with the second one about helping me do my job better. And so, you know, be ready to be responsive on this. So Linda's comment, even after testing and failing, product management still rolls out. Look at the Obamacare website disaster. Well, yeah. And, you know, if you've been in testing for any length of time, you know that the curse of Cassandra is one of the things that we have to live with as testers. And the curse of Cassandra, for those of you who don't remember the Greek mythology, was that she was cursed to be able to see the future and to never be believed when she warned people about the future. And Cassandra was Priam's daughter, and so she was warning about the Trojans and the Greeks coming and attacking Troy and so forth, and you know, wasn't taken seriously. This is something that you know, it happens to you as a professional tester. You will feel like Cassandra sometimes, and what that can mean is a number of things. That sometimes it's about the way that you're delivering the message, right? So if you're a test manager and you're part of a disastrous release, you know, ask yourself, And seriously, not like trying to rationalize, just with a totally open mind. Maybe you give yourself some time after the emotions have kind of gone away. Sit back and ask yourself, is there anything I could have done to deliver information, either more information, different information, or just better delivery of information that would have prevented that disaster? And not just at the end when the release is being made, but throughout the process, right? At what points could I potentially have effectively intervened and course corrected in some way? And it could be that the honest answer is no. I worked on a project that I consider to be a significant, disastrous project, and I feel like I delivered early information to the project management team saying, look, this has all the hallmarks and setups of a disaster. We need to head this off, and by the time we started doing our testing and telling people how bad it was, then they were like, oh, it's not going to be that big of a deal. So sometimes the answer is there's really not much that you could have done. But honestly, asking yourself that question is better than just going, oh, well, I gave them the information. They made stupid decisions. Bummer. Gene asks, are there some generally accepted estimation practices for cost and schedule of testing? What I would suggest is you go listen to my recorded webinar on test estimation, which is out on the RBCS website, and see if that gives you some ideas. Now, Bassam asks, how do I increase testing coverage when I'm not having a great understanding of the code merged or about the feature? So this is something that I addressed in one of my webinars called Dimensions of Test Coverage, which was also recorded, and Bassam, I'd encourage you to take a listen to that. Code coverage is only one of the many dimensions of coverage that you want to look at. So, I would suggest that you listen to that. I gave that presentation yesterday here at STPCon, and that was quite well received. So Jane says, just an opinion, it is very frustrating for testers to work with stakeholders that keep on changing the business requirements while it is already on the testing phase, and then ask you to deliver the result at the same scheduled date. Yeah. Improper change control, definitely one of the big risks for testing in sequential lifecycle models. Obviously, if you're doing an agile lifecycle model, then there are things that are hopefully, depending on your implementation of agile, cooked into the process that allow you to try to avoid some of this pain. But it's still, what do we want to be when we grow up? Pretty problematic, I guess, if that's constantly happening. I got a question here from a C. Jones, and maybe that's, I'm not sure who that would be, what is your observation on Jira for test case creation and execution? I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest with you. I think Jira, I'm a bigger fan of Jira from a point of view of test case creation and execution than I am of Jira as a defect tracking tool. Jira is more of a task management tool, and I guess you could say that certainly tests can be thought of as tasks, and they are, and they can be measured like tasks in terms of progress. But then there's special kinds of tasks because they don't just have a done status, right? I mean, they have a variety of status that can include pass, failed, yet to be run. So, it might be that you need to extend it. I'm always a little concerned when I'm working with a client that's saying, oh, yeah, we're using Jira for our test management tool. I'm like, yeah, but Jira was not designed to be a test management tool. So, things like its coverage capabilities and so forth, I'm just pretty skeptical about Jira on that, for that reason. So Evelyn asks, how do you deal with a situation where a test team is finding lots of bugs, but not bugs that customers care about? For example, launch with a lot of open bugs, but then customers don't encounter those bugs. They encounter different ones. So that is a classic failure to properly perform risk-based testing. So I would suggest that what you do is take a look at techniques like for risk-based testing, such as the ones that I describe in my books and courses, not some of the other techniques that I mentioned earlier in the course, and figure out how to get better stakeholder insight into what should be tested and how much and in what order, and include that in your process of planning your tests. That sounds to me like that's what's missing here. That's the first thing that I would look at. Are we doing proper risk-based testing? Now, there could be other reasons for this, like we build stuff that's brand new and nobody knows what's going to be done with it. But even in those situations, my experience is that risk-based testing is often going to be helpful. So Mike says, how do you deal with the situation where the stakeholders undervalue testing because it will get the product out the door quicker and provide earlier revenue? In other words, dealing with field bugs later is worth bringing in the revenue now. How do you show value in this situation? Well, it certainly is the case for some projects that getting the product out the door, getting some customer feedback, getting customer revenue, even though there are known problems, is the right thing to do. Give one example of that was happened to me at one point where I was managing testing on a new product and was advocating that we extend testing a little longer. And a couple times it was extended, and the last time it was not. And the reason it was not, excuse me, the reason it was not the last time was that the funders of the company said that, you have to realize revenue pretty much now, and if you don't, then we're pulling the funding. So, the better a live dog than a dead lion argument is pretty much a winner, right? So I think, Mike, it's important that we as test professionals adopt a balanced view with this and think of testing as helping people make smarter business decisions. So, try to collaborate. Now, you might not ultimately agree, and that's certainly a strong possibility that you don't always agree. But do try to take that outlook. And if you disagree, be careful how you disagree. Because if you come across like, okay, this is a really stupid decision and I don't want to have anything to do with it, you say that, and then post-release, when there's all sorts of catastrophes, you're like, see, I told you this was going to be a disaster. Then, the fact that you're right is going to be much less important than the fact that you are perceived as an obnoxious pain in the butt. So you have to be careful with that. It's possible to be very wrong about how you are right. There's a question here about will this recording be sent? No, there will be the recordings are not sent. The recordings are posted. They are posted on our digital library, so that's how you will find them, Kembley. A comment here from Keith, who unfortunately has left, but I think it's worth reading. He says, thanks, Rex. I don't have a question, but I came away with further confirmation that as our own organization becomes increasingly agile, it is up to me as test manager to make our value more visible to stakeholders. I'll definitely follow up on the suggested resources for further study. So, good luck to you, Keith. A question from Gary Goloski. Gary, good to hear from you again. I hope you guys are doing well up there in Pittsburgh, if I'm remembering it properly. So he says, in an effort to further reduce defects prior to GA, general availability, we are using some test-driven development techniques like coding, testing, docking simultaneously against common acceptance criteria. All must be done and working with no known defects before the Scrum team moves into their next story. Do you have any insight into the effectiveness of such, or things to avoid, or things to manage? No, this is definitely a good practice, really a best practice of Agile, to have that kind of discipline. The key is keeping that kind of discipline, maintaining that kind of discipline. Some organizations have trouble with that because ensuring that everything is done, truly done, before moving on to the next story is a level of discipline that not organizations can keep. But I would say just keep focused on that, keep up the rigor on that, and I think that approach is going to serve you well. So Miriam says, I understand that the information that we present to our stakeholders will depend on the audience, but by chance, do you have some resources to use in order to learn how to create good reports with valuable and useful information? Yeah, there's all sorts of templates and examples on the basic, advanced, and digital library that you can take a look at. Just go crawl around out there and see what you find. There's a lot of stuff. Ben says, which folder in the RBCS website are the slides? I found the recorded webinars under digital library, but I don't see the slides. That's right, because the slides themselves, the PDFs of the slides are on the basic library. Let's see. Alex says, we're hearing our clients asking more and more about associating the cost of testing to the business value. For example, how many transactions would not be processed if we hadn't found XYZ defect? Do you have any thoughts about this? Well, the trouble with trying to tease out the value of individual defects is that there's a very large volume of them, and to some extent it's kind of hypothetical. In some cases it's really clear, and you can make a clear anecdote, right? And certainly while anecdotes are not statistically significant, anecdotes, people are storytelling animals, right? So a strong anecdote about, we found this bug, and if this bug had gotten out into the field, by God, that would have cost us X million dollars. That definitely, it's great to have a few of those in your pocket. So when a really critical bug is found by testing, and you can figure out, you can really point to this would have cost us a huge amount of money, and you can quantify that, have some of those. But for the most part, I'm more of a fan of kind of using cost to quality to come up with average costs of failures at various points in the life cycle, and then use that sort of information to build the business case. Because you can, one of the risks if you try to do this across all of the bugs is you start to get speculative and you get bogged down in the little minutia rather than the higher level of detail, which is, on average, what is the value that's being delivered in terms of bug savings. Tamatha says, hi Rex, when you were talking about legal and regulatory risks, what were the two important testing criteria at the end? One was mission critical. What was the other? Thank you. The other was safety critical. So mission critical would be something like software that runs the bank. So if the mainframe goes down, that's going to be a real problem with respect to the bank staying up. Safety critical is the software that runs the pacemaker that's implanted in your grandfather's chest or father's chest. That's something, it could kill somebody. Right? So those are the two things that tend to have legal and regulatory risks. Chase says, do you feel that business decision makers honestly believe testing is a waste of time and money, or are they more afraid of what it will uncover and inhibit them from releasing a clean product on time? I'm sure there's some of that out there. I'm sure there's some level of cynicism in certain people, but I try to operate from the assumption that until I'm confronted by incontrovertible evidence that somebody is evil and corrupt, that they actually are generally good people and trying to do good work, that people are take their job seriously. They're trying to do their job. They're trying to do the best they can, and and in many cases, business decision makers are confronted by a welter of conflicting information, and it's very hard to tease out of all that conflicting information what's truth here. I had a CEO tell me a couple years ago. I was asking him about his frustrations with testing, and he said, we do a lot of testing here, and we've got a lot of different groups doing testing, and I can't get a single picture out of all of it, and it's just like a kaleidoscope. I look into the thing, and it's you know, depending on how I spin the end of it, I see something different. You know, so I mean, I think this is, I think, you know, we're dealing with a complicated situation, and you're trying to get information across to people. You know, it can be difficult to explain, but I would really encourage you to start with the assumption that people are well-intentioned and trying to do their best work and go at it that way. Because, you know, I mean, if you really think, Chase, that the situation you're currently in, that all of the folks that are the business decision makers are just, you know, cynical and don't care about quality and so forth, then, you know, maybe you just need to find another job. I mean, if you think that these people are just bad. Okay. Donna J says, while testing compliance regulatory software products with changes coming on the 11th hour, how to manage build confidence through testing, especially when you have very little time for testing and product delivery dates cannot be extended. Well, when you're in a regulatory or compliance type of situation, there are certain things that simply must be done. And in some cases, testers actually, or test managers actually have to sign off on the completion of those things. I think you need to be clear right from the start that if those things are not done, you will be unable, out of your ethical obligations, to perjure yourself effectively, or to give false witness and say, oh, those things, yes, these things were done, right? I wouldn't go around banging that drum a lot because, again, that's something that's likely to alienate people, but a smart, diplomatically worded but totally unambiguous email to the effect that you will not participate in whitewashing the delivery of something that does not meet its compliance requirements is a smart thing to do, because you do not want to be in a situation where because of the rate of change and so forth, you are unable to meet the compliance rules, and then you sign and say, yes, I did, because you didn't. Okay, my company wants to move from manual to automation. Which tool should I offer, Selenium or QTP? Okay, so I get this question a lot. In fact, I got this question yesterday. I was giving a presentation, and again, I cannot do it. I cannot make a recommendation for a tool without participating in a careful tool evaluation process in your organization. So, you know, I'm happy to do that. Obviously, that's a consulting engagement. There are also plenty of books out there that describe what the proper process is for identifying your tool requirements and constraints and going through a proper evaluation of the tool. I believe there's actually some material on that in the ISTQB Foundation syllabus. So there are plenty of ways to go about getting a tool, but trust me, Dan, coming to somebody, anybody you perceive as an authority, me or anybody else, and saying, please tell me without any additional information what kind of tool I should get, would be like you're in a call-in show with a doctor and you call in and say, I have pain in my lower left abdomen. Should I take aspirin for that? You know, I mean, it's just not possible. It's too complicated of a question. So sorry about that. Peter asks, can you recommend how to deal with senior management who want from the QA team the confidence and good feelings to launch a product, but don't want to accept that it takes time, information, and work for the team to deliver this? Well, you know, confidence often comes down to what level of coverage you've achieved with respect to the requirements, the risks, etc. So, you know, I think that having a smart conversation with them about, you give me this amount of time and money and this is how much coverage I can achieve, versus if you don't give me that, you give me, you know, this less, and you quantify what less is, then I'm only going to be able to achieve this, and therefore, I won't be able to really give you any confidence that these things can't happen. You have to, approach this conversation diplomatically. Obviously, as one of my clients put it, everybody wants to ride in the taxi, but nobody wants to pay for the taxi. So, you need to be clear that it does cost time and money to do this well, and help them understand, sort of bring them to your reality. Aaron says, thanks, Rex. Great presentation. I'm forwarding the link to my supervisors. Great. I hope they get some value from it. Alex says, thanks, Rex. Always enjoy your sessions. You are welcome. It's my pleasure. Let's see. So Christina says, for example, project managers ask about GUI test coverage when requirements are not linked to tests. What could be used for the coverage measurement there? Besides that, thanks for the interesting presentation. In order to talk about coverage in a meaningful sense, and you're talking about black box testing, you really have to have traceability of the test back to what it covers. So it doesn't have to be a requirement. It could be other things. It can be things like user interface standards. It can be things like risks, supported configurations. And again, I have a presentation on dimensions of test coverage that I'd recommend that you take a look at. But, whatever, you're still going to have that traceability there to be able to produce any sort of report that gives a real objective measure of what has and has not been covered. And, it sounds like that's maybe missing in this case. So, if you've got no traceability, you've got no ability to give objective coverage assessments, and that's going to result in credibility problems. So John says the executive does buy into testing, but middle management and supervisors will not allocate resources to aid in user testing, citing production demands, making the executive forget about testing. If slowing down production is time and money, how can we convince stakeholders that testing should win? Well, so it sounds like one of the things you might be dealing with here is the classic V model, sequential lifecycle model, trade-off between quality and schedule. So one of the things that I would suggest is that you try to reframe the debate into trade-offs between features, quality, schedule, and budget. And say, look, if you put a bunch of features in there, that's going to spread the testing thin, and it's also going to increase the number of defects, and it's going to mean that we have lower levels of quality. So if people are saying that, budget is fixed because we can't afford to hire anybody else, and we can't afford to buy tools, et cetera, and schedule is fixed because we absolutely have to hit particular release dates for whatever reason, then say, look, then what we really ought to be doing is making a decision about what amount of features and what's the level of quality, understanding that with fixed schedule and quality, the higher the number of features that we select, the lower the level of quality that we're going to deliver. So see if you can reframe the debate a little bit. Okay, Jeanette asks, how do you convey value to the development organization and fight against an us versus them mentality when the testing management is pushing value equals number of test cases written / executed and number of test cases found, and giving the appearance of creating an us versus them scenario? Oh, okay, that's bad. I would recommend that whoever is pushing this really limited and dysfunctional way of measuring testing value, that they go take a listen to some of the stuff on the RBCS website about metrics, because what you're describing here sounds like just a classic dysfunctional use of metrics. It also sounds like you might very well be in what I refer to as the feared enforcer mode here. That's that us versus them thing, and I did a webinar on that not too long ago. You might want to take a listen to that and get some ideas there. But it sounds like based on this information, which I agree is limited, sounds like a pretty dysfunctional scenario. All right, Andrew says, thank you for the presentation. Jane says, thanks. Just want you to know that your webinar is being watched here in the Philippines. So great. Best of wishes to you in the Philippines. I hope you guys have cleaned up after that disastrous was it earthquake or storm or something. That was horrible. A question about PDUs here. You should get an email in the next 4 or 5 days confirming that you were an attendee, and that's what you use to claim the PDUs. Rolf says, it seems your list focuses on the value testers can add towards the end of the project. I believe testers can also help clarifying requirements by suggesting and discussing fit criteria, for example, test cases. Of course, this needs to happen very early in the project. Yes, absolutely, and that was one of the things that I was talking about in terms of the smoother and more predictable releases. That's the focus on the front end, and you need to make sure that you're promoting good practice throughout the entire process, right? Not just bandages at the end. I agree. Okay, great. Well, thank you all for the great questions. That was a lot of fun. To close this session, a little bit more about the resources available through RBCS. As I'm sure most of you know, we run these free webinar sessions once a month, so please check our website, rbcs-us.com, to sign up. If you like a special webinar presentation for your company only of this webinar or in any other topic related to software testing, you can send us an email, info@rbcs-us.com, or contact us via our website. You can sign up for our regular free newsletter, again, at rbcs-us.com. This will get you valuable discounts on consulting and training services, along with a regular newsletter, which will include a featured article on software testing and quality, as well as news about what we're doing. You can follow us on Twitter or at RBCS, and we're also on Facebook, RBCS-INC. I post pretty regularly on Twitter lately, so keep up with me. You can keep up with me on that. Do check your email over the next couple days. You could be the lucky winner of the free e-learning course. You were registered just by attending. If you think that this was a great webinar and you've got somebody else in your organization that you think should take a look at it, send them to the digital library. If you'd like to hear it again, you can do it via RSS feed or by iTunes. You can listen to the podcasts. And you can also find our recorded videos and webinars on the RBCS channel on YouTube. We offer these services as free resources as a service to the software testing community because at RBCS we are a not-just-for-profit company. That concludes the webinar. Thanks to all of you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you at future events.